I've been very blessed with my film career. It all began with Bruce Lee. Bruce came to New York. Chuck Norris kept a secret for 26 years. In 1962, he was just 22, married and stationed in California. One night changed everything. He had an affair with a woman named Johanna. He never told her he was married. She got pregnant and never told Chuck. While Chuck became the world's toughest action hero, his daughter grew up without knowing her father existed. In 1991, everything came crashing down when Dena wrote him a letter that would expose his darkest shame. Chuck Norris was born in a town most people never heard of, Ryan, Oklahoma. Just a few dirt roads, barely 1,000 people. His name was Carlos Ray Norris, but the world would later know him as Chuck. At first, his life looked nothing like a hero's story. His father, Ray, came back from World War II with more demons than medals. He drank too much, disappeared for weeks, and sold whatever the family owned for more booze. One time, it was Chuck's bike. Another time, it was his mother's wedding ring. His mom, Wilma, tried to keep things together, but they were always moving 16 times before Chuck turned 18. They lived off food stamps, kindness, and her working multiple jobs. Chuck and his brothers often hid in their room while their dad yelled about money and threatened violence. The stress was so heavy that Chuck developed a stutter. He hardly talked in class and struggled with grades, not because he wasn't smart, but because he was exhausted, anxious, and ashamed. At school, he didn't fit in. He was small, shy, and never good at sports. He wasn't the tough guy. He wasn't even average. But inside, something was building. Chuck's mother finally divorced Ray in 1956. She packed their few belongings, took her sons, and ran. They landed first in Kansas, then in Torrance, California. The new start wasn't as clean as they hoped. Chuck still felt like the poor, broken kid from Oklahoma. He was 16, deeply introverted, and terrified people would find out about his past. He barely spoke in high school and avoided attention. He didn't see a future. He only saw escape. He was just 18, skinny, quiet, and unsure of his future. Nobody, especially not his own family, expected Chuck Norris to suddenly join the U.S. Air Force in 1958. He had never been into sports, never showed interest in the military, and definitely didn't seem like the kind of guy who would go chasing any physical challenge. But out of nowhere, he signed up. Even more surprising, he married his high school sweetheart, Diane Holchek, just days before shipping out to basic training. It wasn't about adventure or patriotism. Chuck later admitted it was a desperate move. He needed a stable job, steady pay, and a way to support his new wife. The military seemed like the only way out. At the time, he weighed just 140 pounds and had never even been in a fight. His recruiter didn't think he'd make it past training, but Chuck pushed through and was eventually stationed at Osan Air Base in South Korea. That's where everything changed. In 1958, South Korea was still recovering from the war. The base was tense, cold, and filled with culture shock. Chuck was assigned as a military policeman. During his off hours, he noticed something odd. Korean and Japanese martial artists training in a style he'd never seen before. The moves were sharp, the discipline was strict, and despite never being athletic, Chuck was drawn to it. He started training in Tang Soo Do and Taekwondo not because he had some dream, but because he was bored and lonely. What started as a way to kill time became something deeper. He trained every chance he got. He wasn't naturally gifted. He had to work harder than anyone else. But there was something about the focus and control that spoke to him. Slowly, he started to change. His instructors took notice. So did his fellow servicemen, who began calling him Chuck, a nickname that stuck. He trained late at night, long after others had gone home. He practiced until his hands bled. He broke boards, he broke bones, but he didn't stop. He earned his black belt in record time. People were shocked. This wasn't the same awkward, insecure teenager who showed up in Korea. This was someone different, someone tougher, someone focused. When he returned home in 1962, he had changed completely. He left the Air Force as an airman first class, but more importantly, he returned with confidence. He tried to become a police officer in Torrance, California, but got stuck on a waiting list. Most people would have waited around. Chuck didn't. Instead, he opened a small martial arts studio in Torrance that same year. Martial arts weren't a big thing in the US back then. It was a risky move, but he believed in it. Word spread fast. His teaching wasn't just about fighting. It was about discipline control and self-respect. Students came from all backgrounds. Some just wanted to learn self-defense. Others were lost like Chuck once was. But he taught them all. Before he became a Hollywood icon, Chuck Norris was just another fighter stepping into the ring. Nervous, unsure, and about to get knocked down. In the mid-1960s, he entered his first tournaments with high hopes, but quickly ran into a wall. He lost to Joe Louis, one of the most feared fighters of the era. Then Alan Steen beat him too. And just when things couldn't feel worse, Tony Tulliners defeated him 3 times at the International Karate Championships. These weren't close calls. They were harsh public reminders that Norris wasn't ready yet. From 1964 to 1966, the losses stacked up. But he didn't quit. Instead, he doubled down. He trained harder, studied strategy, and reshaped his fighting style. The setbacks didn't break him. They built him. Everything changed in 1967. That year, Norris walked into S. Henry Cho's North American Karate Championship in Madison Square Garden. It wasn't just another tournament. It was personal. Standing across from him was Joe Louis, the same man who had crushed him earlier. This time, Norris was sharper, faster, and mentally stronger. The match was brutal, but Norris came out on top. The final score 27.5 to 25.5. It was close, but it was enough. He didn't just win, he sent a message. That moment in front of a roaring crowd became his turning point. He was no longer the underdog. He was a real threat. But the fight didn't end there. Just a few months later, Louis struck back. At June Rhee's U.S. Karate Championships, he beat Norris and reclaimed his crown. From that point on, the two were locked in a war of pride and skill. They kept clashing throughout 1967, trading wins and losses. Every match was electric. Their rivalry wasn't just about fists. It was about mind games. Norris was the disciplined tactician trained in Korean martial arts. Louis was the raw powerhouse, a heavyweight with an aggressive edge. Fans couldn't get enough. Their duels lit up the karate scene and brought the sport into the American spotlight. Then, in early 1968, something unexpected happened. Norris lost again, but this time it wasn't to Louis. It was to Luis Delgado, a lesser-known fighter who wasn't supposed to win. The decision loss shocked everyone. For a moment, it looked like Norris might fade out, but instead of folding, he regrouped. That November, he faced Delgado again, this time with everything on the line. Norris didn't just win, he demolished him. And with that, he claimed the professional middleweight karate championship. That victory marked the start of something special. From 1968 to 1974, Chuck Norris didn't lose a single professional fight. Not one. He held the title for 6 straight years, and racked up a career record of 65 wins and just 5 losses, almost all of them from his early years. He swept through the biggest tournaments, the International Karate Championships, the All-American Championships, and the National Tournament of Champions. In 1969, Black Belt magazine named him Fighter of the Year. He even earned karate's Triple Crown for winning the most tournaments that year. But Norris wasn't just dominating in the ring. He started teaching mentoring a new wave of fighters. By the time he retired in 1974, he wasn't just a champion, he was a legend. In 1968, Chuck Norris appeared in The Wrecking Crew, a spy comedy starring Dean Martin and Sharon Tate. But you'd have to squint hard to find him. He played man in the House of Seven Joys, just a nameless guy in a chaotic fight scene. No dialogue, no close-up, just fists flying in the background. That tiny appearance didn't just mark his debut. It placed him right next to two legends, Bruce Lee choreographing his first Hollywood fight scenes, and Sharon Tate filming what would be her last movie before her murder in 1969. And yet the irony was brutal. Chuck was already a world karate champion. He had just won the world middleweight title and would hold it for 6 straight years. Still in Hollywood, he was just another nameless face on a $2.4 million set. But things began to shift in 1967, before that film even hit theaters. That year, Chuck met Bruce Lee at the All-American Karate Open at Madison Square Garden. Lee was there to perform. Chuck was there to dominate. And he did, winning the championship. They connected instantly. What started as mutual respect turned into real friendship. 5 years later, Bruce called Chuck with an offer. Play the main villain in The Way of the Dragon. Chuck hesitated. He wasn't an actor. He wasn't even sure he wanted to be on camera. Bruce laughed and said, "You'll lose the fight, but you'll look good doing it." That fight scene filmed in the Roman Colosseum became legendary. It took days to shoot. Every move was choreographed by Lee and Norris themselves, and Bruce did something rare. He let Chuck fight back, not just flail around, actually fight. That trust gave Chuck global exposure. He wasn't just a martial artist anymore. He was a screen fighter the world wanted to see more of. Still, Hollywood didn't open its arms right away. In the early 70s, Chuck was running karate schools in LA, teaching celebrities to make ends meet. One of those clients was Steve McQueen. The king of cool saw something in Chuck, something bigger than just black belts and spinning kicks. When Chuck's businesses started sinking, McQueen pulled him aside. "Try acting," he said. "You've got the look, you've got the presence. Use it." Chuck laughed it off, but McQueen didn't let it go. His words stuck. In 1977, Chuck finally gave it a shot. His first starring role came in Breaker Breaker, a trucker revenge flick made on a shoestring budget. Critics rolled their eyes, but the film pulled in $12 million. Suddenly, Chuck wasn't just a karate guy. He was a leading man, but he still had to prove he could carry a film on his own. That moment came in 1978, with Good Guys Wear Black. No studio wanted him, so Chuck and his team rented theaters themselves. They called it four-walling. If no one else would release it, they would. Chuck hit the road doing over 2,000 interviews in 1 year. The grind landed him in the hospital with laryngitis, but the gamble paid off. The film made over $18 million on a $1 million budget. One scene where he launches a flying kick through a car windshield became an instant icon. Audiences didn't care about acting awards. They wanted action. Chuck gave it to them. And for the first time, America had its own homegrown martial arts star. After that, the hits kept coming. A Force of One grossed up to $23 million on a budget as low as $2.5 million. In 1980, The Octagon mixed ninjas with voiceover narration and added a psychological edge. Audiences loved it. Then came An Eye for an Eye in 1981. Chuck as a vengeful cop. One role after another, he carved out his space. In 1984, Chuck Norris made a deal that would change everything. Cannon Films, known for cranking out low-budget action flicks, signed him for a multi-picture contract. The first movie from that deal, Missing in Action, hit theaters on November 16, 1984. It wasn't just a hit. It exploded, earning $22.8 million in the US and playing in over 200 cinemas. Cannon rushed out a prequel, Missing in Action 2, just 4 months later. That kind of turnaround was unheard of, but Cannon knew what they had. Chuck was more than just a star. He was their golden ticket. By 1986, Cannon's future was basically riding on Norris's shoulders. Every film he made with them, from Invasion USA to The Delta Force, outperformed their other releases. Their business model was simple: buy cheap scripts, shoot fast, and let Chuck's name carry the rest. And it worked. So much so that his contract became one of Cannon's most valuable assets. They even gave him creative control, rare for an action star back then. He picked scripts. He helped cast the roles. In a world full of muscle-bound heroes, Norris became something more, a partner. But his movies weren't just about explosions and fistfights. They captured a mood, one shaped by the Reagan era. America was knee-deep in Cold War tension. People were hungry for stories where good defeated evil. Chuck gave them that. Missing in Action tapped into the pain of Vietnam. He played Colonel James Braddock, a man rescuing American POWs that everyone else had forgotten. That movie and its 2 sequels earned nearly $40 million in the US alone. Then came Invasion USA in 1985. The plot: Soviet-backed terrorists invade Florida. Norris fights them off one by one as a retired CIA agent. It made $17.5 million and gave audiences exactly what they wanted: simple justice in a complex world. The Delta Force, released in 1986, followed a similar path. Chuck led a special ops unit to rescue hostages from Middle Eastern terrorists. It was ripped from the headlines and exaggerated for the screen. But that was the point. These weren't just action movies. They were patriotic fantasies. And Chuck, he was the American everyman, righting the world's wrongs with nothing but grit and martial arts. Still, not everything Norris did fit the usual mold. In 1985, he surprised everyone with Code of Silence. It wasn't just another action flick. It had depth. It had critics talking. Directed by Andrew Davis, who would later direct The Fugitive, the film opened at #1 and earned over $20 million. Vincent Canby from the New York Times called it a breakout for Chuck. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars. The fight scenes were tight, but so was the drama. For once, critics and fans agreed Norris could actually act. That same year, he kept experimenting. In Silent Rage 1982, he faced off against a genetically modified killer. It was part sci-fi, part horror, and it earned $10 million. In Firewalker 1986, he played a treasure hunter alongside Louis Gossett Jr., mixing action with comedy. That one also pulled in over $10 million. It was a clear attempt to show he wasn't just a one-note tough guy. Cannon took risks. So did Chuck. And sometimes they worked. But by the 1990s, the box office had started to turn. Audiences were changing. So was Hollywood. Big-budget blockbusters and slick new stars were taking over. Chuck needed to pivot, and fast. In 1993, he made a bold move. He left the big screen and stepped into television with Walker, Texas Ranger. It could have flopped. Back then, TV wasn't seen as a step up for movie stars. But Chuck believed in the character. Cordell Walker was a modern-day cowboy with a martial arts twist. The show drew inspiration from his 1983 movie, Lone Wolf McQuade. This time, though, Chuck had more than just a starring role. He was also executive producer. That meant full creative control. Walker, Texas Ranger debuted on April 21, 1993. It had action. It had moral lessons. It had Texas. And people couldn't get enough. What started as a mid-season replacement turned into a juggernaut. The show ran for 8 years, airing 203 episodes. From 1990 to 1999, it stayed in the top 30 most-watched shows and even broke into the top 20 twice. That's rare for any show, let alone one airing on Saturday nights. It wasn't just the ratings that made Walker special. The show filmed in Texas, giving it a gritty, real-world feel. Each episode tackled big issues: drug addiction, racism, domestic violence, while sticking to a message of justice and redemption. Chuck's character was more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of integrity. Viewers loved him for it, and Chuck made sure his values shaped the show. As executive producer, he worked behind the scenes to keep the tone in line with what he believed in family, community, and faith. In one 1999 Christmas episode, his character even talked about Jesus, something Chuck and his wife helped write into the script. It wasn't just for show. Off-screen Norris launched the Kick Drugs Out of America Foundation in 1990, using martial arts to help at-risk kids. That spirit bled into Walker, which was full of storylines that pushed compassion, forgiveness, and second chances. The show didn't just win viewers, it shaped culture. Martial arts schools saw a rise in enrollment. Chuck became an international symbol. The show aired in over 100 countries. In 2010, Texas Governor Rick Perry made him an honorary Texas Ranger. That wasn't just a photo op. It was recognition of the impact Walker had on law enforcement's public image. And then came the memes. The Chuck Norris facts, wild, over-the-top jokes about his strength and toughness took over the internet. They started as jokes, but turned into something bigger. They kept his legend alive for a new generation. And all of it, the films, the show, the memes, fed back into the same idea. Chuck Norris wasn't just a guy in movies. He became a symbol of toughness, of justice, of doing the right thing no matter how hard. In 1962, Chuck Norris was just 22. He was stationed in California with the U.S. Air Force, married to his high school sweetheart, Diane, for 4 years. He wasn't famous yet, just a young man, lonely and far from home. One night he had a brief affair in the back seat of a car. It lasted only minutes. He never thought it would matter, but it did. The woman's name was Johanna. And what happened that night would come back to him nearly 3 decades later. Chuck never told Johanna he was married. That made it worse. She thought he was single. In his own words, he later admitted to my shame, "I never told Johanna that I was married." It wasn't just a mistake. It was a lie, one that hurt not just his wife, but Johanna too. That kind of guilt doesn't just fade with time. It grows especially for someone who would later become known for strict morals and a deep Christian faith. Johanna got pregnant. She had a daughter named Dena, but she kept the truth to herself. No child support, no calls, no scandal. She didn't tell Chuck. She didn't tell Dena. She raised her alone quietly. She believed revealing the truth would only cause pain. As Chuck's fame grew, Johanna stayed silent. She didn't want to ruin his life. She didn't want Dena to grow up in someone else's shadow. That kind of sacrifice is hard to understand unless you've lived it. 26 years passed. Dena grew up without knowing her real father. Chuck became a martial arts icon, opened training centers, starred in action movies, and was known around the world. Meanwhile, Johanna never said a word. It was only in 1991 that fate stepped in. Dena overheard a conversation between her mother and a friend. A name stood out, Chuck Norris. Something clicked, and suddenly the truth she'd never expected became impossible to ignore. Dena wrote a letter. It wasn't a fan note or a cry for money. She told Chuck the truth. She was his daughter. She didn't want fame or support. She just wanted him to know. Chuck had divorced Diane 3 years earlier. Maybe that timing helped, but what mattered most was how he responded. He didn't ask for a DNA test. He didn't doubt her. He accepted her immediately. "I didn't need DNA or blood tests," he said. At that moment, it was as if I had known her all my life. That first meeting between them was full of tears. Chuck wrapped his arms around her and they cried. Years of silence and separation dissolved in a single moment. Dena had taken a risk. Johanna had tried to stop her. She warned it could ruin Chuck's life. But Dena wanted the truth more than comfort, and Chuck, to his credit, welcomed it. In time, he opened up about it all. He admitted his past. He admitted the affair, the lies, the shame. He said there might be illegitimate parents in the world. "I know because I was one, but there are not illegitimate children." That sentence alone showed how far he'd come. It wasn't just about Dena anymore. It was about redemption, grace, and responsibility. But life had more to throw at him. In 2013, Chuck's wife, Gina, went in for a series of MRIs. Doctors used a contrast agent to improve the scans. It was supposed to be routine, but soon after, Gina's body reacted violently. She described the pain as if acid had gone through her. Within days, she couldn't walk. She was bedridden for 5 months. She had tremors, couldn't speak properly, and needed to be fed through a tube. Chuck stayed by her side every minute. When doctors dismissed her symptoms, he searched for answers. Eventually, a second opinion confirmed their fears. It was gadolinium poisoning. Chuck dropped everything. At age 80, he walked away from Hollywood. He stopped acting. He slept beside Dena on a couch for months, read her 17 books, and never left her side. He later said that wasn't just a quote, it was a vow. The fight wasn't cheap. They spent over $2 million on treatments. And still Chuck never blinked. His fame, his fortune, it didn't matter. All that mattered was Dena. That kind of devotion isn't loud. It's quiet, relentless, real. And then came the internet jokes. In 2005, Chuck became the subject of one of the biggest memes in online history. Chuck Norris can divide by 0. Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups. He pushes the earth down. They were everywhere. A college student had started it as a joke. The world ran with it. At first, Chuck wasn't amused. Some of the jokes crossed the line. He even sued a publisher. But later he embraced it. He released his own book of Chuck Norris facts, each one followed by a personal story. In the end, the meme made him more famous than ever, especially with younger fans who had never seen his movies. But behind all the myths and legends is a man who made real sacrifices, a man who lied once and spent decades making it right, a man who gave up his career to save his wife, a man who lived with guilt, then turned it into something redemptive.